Welcome to my second Touchdesigner tutorial. Apologies in advance for the bad audio. I don't have a mic set up at home yet, so we're just using the onboard mic on my desktop, which obviously not the best audio solution in the world, but hey, it'll get the job done. Anyway, what we're doing today, similar vibe as last time. I don't know exactly what we're going to wind up with. I'm just going to start noodling with kind of an end product in mind. And let me show you what the end product is. So we're going to do, by popular request, we're going to do some stuff with particle systems again. We used that kind of as a secondary feature of the network yesterday. It was built just to give our feedback loop some input so we could have ripples, but we didn't dive too much into various things you can do with particle systems. So all of these videos that I have stacked up here were made using essentially the same technique. So let me just play these real quick. Okay, so we get some people with some spirally stuff going into some pyramids. Pretty sweet. This was one I did for an art gallery opening. This is just pure abstraction. You may notice it has the same background as this, just colored slightly differently. Same technique though. Let's see. This one is more recent. Same technique, very different result. And this is one of my first kind of real explorations of particle systems, and it's also one of the most popular posts I've made on Instagram. So anyway, same technique. Looks like this one just has some gentle post-render feedback on it, but all of the behavior you're seeing and all of the points are generated using the same particle technique that I'm gonna start with today. So anyway, there's some examples of what can be done with this. Let's go back to Touchdesigner and get started. So again, same disclaimer. This is more for people who have a basic understanding of Touchdesigner to begin with. And have watched some more fundamental tutorials. If you haven't, as always, I recommend Electronaut's Touchdesigner Beginner course. It's on YouTube. It's free. I don't know too many people who use Touchdesigner who didn't learn from those videos. So anyway, first thing we're going to do is we're going to clear out the default project nodes, and we're going to put something of our own in. So actually, let's do this a little differently. So I want to introduce you guys to a resource that I use all the time. You guys hear my dog in the background crying at me? What's up, buddy? I'm doing something. I know. I know, they're waiting for me to stop talking to you. They are. They are. I bet some of them fast forwarded. Okay, anyway. CG Trader. There are many sites that have free 3D models that you can just download and use. This is one of them. There are quite a few, but this actually, this body right here, it says it's supposed to be Spider-Man. Looks a little too beefy to be Spider-Man in my opinion, but hey. Spider-Man, allegedly. This is what this was actually the base geometry for not this one, but this one. Search. What do you think? Yeah, it's the base geometry for this one. So this sort of angelic looking creature you see here is it actually started as Spider-Man. So um, anyway, I just wanted to introduce you to this resource. If you use the filters up here and have the free box checked, then everything you'll see, with the exception of these ads up top, is going to be a free downloadable 3D resource. What you're looking for to be able to just easily use it in Touchdesigner is going to be the .obj format, which you see down in the box here. You can work with these other formats, not all of them, but most of these other formats you can work with in Touchdesigner. It's just if you're not trying to retain, say, the actual look of a thing, like if you don't care so much about the I don't know, the textures on this TV, or you know wouldn't care if this guy was wearing a blue and red suit, then OBJ is going to be the way to go, because it's going to look basically like this. It'll just be textureless, or not textureless, but there will be no material coating the outside. It'll just be like a blank slate, which is typically what we're going to need, because we're not really using the entire model and all of its skin, so to speak. We're actually just using the vertices that create its structural geometry for our particle system. So anyway, feel free to peruse this. There's lots of stuff that will work really well, lots of stuff that I don't know how well it'll work, but bodies, faces, skulls, human heads, stuff like that, those all tend to work pretty well. So let's actually start with that. I have that mesh downloaded, so I'm just going to find it. So much Spider-Man stuff. Where is it? Aha! Okay, so there's my .obj file. So what's nice, if you didn't know you could do this, you can just drag this right out of Finder into Touchdesigner, and it will open it as a SOP, as a file in SOP. So let's take a look at this. All right, so this is cool. So this one's actually pretty reasonably sized. Some of these 3D models, you download them and you look at the coordinates on your axes, and it's out to like 1,000 in every direction. And then you either, if you're a total code wizard, then you could use Marcus Heckman's method for using GLSL to normalize its size and position. I'm more of an eyeball kind of guy, so so usually if I'm working with an imported 3D model, I'll have to transform it to some extent to get it where I want it. So right now it looks like it's standing at 0 on the y-axis. It comes out to, I don't know, maybe roughly somewhere between 1.5 and 2, and negative 1.5 and 2 on the x. And then how tall are we? There's 1, so probably, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish, maybe a little less than 5 tall. So anyway, just for ease of use, when we get into our instancing and have a camera that needs to travel around this thing, I'd like it to be centered at the origin. So I'm going to go ahead and move it down using the Y translate value in my transform SOP, and I think I'm gonna put him right about crotch even with the origin there. So maybe a little lower. Maybe I'll go center of gravity at 0, 0. So like right belly button ish. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, cool. So now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and set up our particle system. So all we're going to do that is select the particle SOP, and as you can see, it's already creating particles. It's interesting. I'm not sure why it's doing these little grids of 9. That's cool. All right, so let's go ahead and turn our display options on so we can see the points a little better. There we go. All right, now that's not really doing much for me, so let's insert a sort. Actually, let's move this over. Let's make our particle stop a bit bigger, since it's kind of the hub for everything else we'll be doing. All right, cool. So we got our sort. Let's fix whatever's happening here. Let's try random. Yeah, I wasn't liking those clusters of points. So, yeah, random's fine. By Z is usually pretty cool, especially with bodies. You get this kind of nice like back to front cross section. It's a little better when you have more particles. Yeah, there you go. You get this kind of cat scan thing. This may be what I did for. Do I still have that video open? Yeah, I think that might be what I did for this. Yeah, because that, see the arms sort of disappear here, and then the legs do. Yeah, that might be what it was. All right, so that's cool. So we'll use by Z, and then we're gonna. This is kind of the territory I didn't really get into with particles on the one I recorded yesterday. We didn't really look at the features of what we can change here. Stop. Again, sorry for the interruption. My dog needed some attention. He's now on my lap. Right. Anyway, so our guy here is particling from back to front along the z-axis, which we changed in our sort. All right, so let's look at some other stuff we can do with particles that we didn't really get into on the previous tutorial. So with particles, just in the particle SOP, we have a number of attributes that we can adjust. So if we don't have our mass or drag attributes on, then these particles are behaving as if being generated in a vacuum with no forces acting on them. If we add these attributes and then change this value, you'll notice the particle behavior changes. In this case, not dramatically, but it's slowed down a bit. If you increase the mass, that will typically give the particles more momentum if there's a force acting on them, so they'll spread out a lot further. For what we're doing here, we don't really need either. Just because I'm paranoid, I'm going to set these back to 1, even though they're off. What we can do also is we can change how long each particle is going to stay in existence before it disappears with the life expectancy here. So if we move that down, it looks like we have some stuck particles. So if we move that down and we pulse our particle system here, you'll see everything just appears and disappears much faster. So that's because I turned the life expectancy way down. And we can experiment with this if we like a more moderate life expectancy, so you get this kind of thinner apparition looking thing. Cool. If you want the particles to stick around a bit longer, the default setting is 3. If we jack this up a bit, they live a lot longer, and so you get some more complex shapes, like you start seeing the entire outline of the body. But well, we haven't run into it yet. But when you start adding life expectancy and life variance to a particle system, your frame rate starts to dip pretty radically. So, especially once you get forces in the mix. So, I don't think we need quite that long of a life expectancy. So, I was cool with some of those kind of fast ones we were looking at. Let's see what that looks like. Let's pulse that, get rid of all those extra particles. All right, cool. So some of the other stuff that we can do, we can add what are called external forces to our particles. I don't know exactly what that does. External force and wind seem to be more or less the exact same thing. Wind is just a less extreme version of external force. So it just sort of makes your particles drift in a direction depending on what your values are in these X, Y, and Z boxes here. So if we add 1 to the Y in our X or 2, then we see the particles all start going up. If we do a less dramatic one, then they should just kind of gently drift up out of their position, which is kind of cool. Similarly, if you want it to go in a downward direction, you can put a negative value there. And there they go. Like I said, wind is a less extreme version of the same thing. So if we add a 1 to our X value here, then we start seeing all the particles drifting that way, which is pretty cool. I think I like that. Now I kind of want to tweak the life expectancy a bit. Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. I guess if I wanted it to look like it was burning, I could also put a little lift on the Y, so it's moving in a direction. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, so we're starting to see that we can get some pretty interesting stuff happening just within the particle SOP. Now, what you can also do is there's another way to apply forces to this. So what we need to do is create a metaball. And then we need to attach that to a force SOP. Okay, so what we're going to do with this is we're going to take it and we're going to put it in the third input in the particle SOP. Okay, so it just pulsed our particles that didn't actually change anything yet. Now, there are obviously 2 other inputs on this. One has to do with attractors, like if you want to put a shape or a line or something along, just at some coordinate in space, and have all your particles move in that direction. I believe you can do that with I don't remember. It's one of these other 2, and then one of the other ones has something to do with creating multiple points from particles to originate from. I might be making that up. There are great tutorials that do cover this, but for what we're doing today, I'm just going to use this third input, which apparently has to do with applying forces to everything that we have here already. So let's check out what we have here. So within the force SOP, we have radial force and we have directional force. I'm going to turn. Let's play with directional force first. So if we're looking here, We'll start the camera moving around. It will not. All right, well, let me create a render just so we can see this a little better. I think I did boxes with example videos, so we'll just stick with that. All right, so we need little itty bitty boxes. Zero, bring it back up to 0.005. All right, let's attach that to Geo. And then let's build the rest of our render network. Okay, if that seemed very fast, that's fine. I just built so many of these render networks. It's kind of just a thing to get over and done with. But just to explain what I did here, a render network consists of a camera, a light, and geometry. That's kind of, you can actually get it without the light, but this is sort of the minimum for what you need to render something. And then we also need this render top. It takes it out of these components and brings it back into tops so we can display it without a lot of finagling. So let's bang that out to a null. Let's add an RGB key so we have a black background. And then let's turn that on. So there's our amazing composition right now. We have one little box in black space. Great. All right, so let's do the instancing setup real quick so we can see. So we click on our Geo component, and then we go to the third tab over, turn instancing on, take our null. Oh yeah, I put this out to a null. It's nice if we change anything. I doubt there'll be anything we need to put after particles, but you know, you never know. Nice to have room for experimentation. So we have our null, we have instancing on, we have that null assigned as our default instancing op. So let's use it. Once we have that in, we should get a nice menu of stuff to mess with. So let's do the typical setup for geometry. We're going to take point 0 or position 0. I'm not sure what the P stands for, but P1 for our X value and then P2 for our Z value. Cool. So that's really all we need at the moment. Yeah. One other thing we can do if we're using a SOP, for instancing, it outputs normal information. If you're not super sure what normals are, I took enough math to get into engineering school years ago, and this is what I remember, but this is my explanation. Normals are the vector that points perpendicularly off of any given plane, or based on the orientation of any given point. It's a vector that just sticks straight off of it. What does that do for us in 3D modeling? It essentially takes since 3D models are typically built out of much smaller pieces of geometry, a lot of the time it's triangles. In the case of mesh, in the case of what we're doing here, it's a bunch of little boxes. Now, what we're doing is pretty abstract, but if you wanted to, for instance, let me just bypass these, so 1 and 0.7. So if we have no forces and maybe way more, oh, that's my dog sneezing. Let's say we have 10,000 particles, maybe even more. And let's say our boxes are a little bigger. Like this would be something that would, If you were going for these boxes to compose a more, I guess, full-looking Spider-Man body, um, what you might notice as these boxes get bigger is this makes a little more sense with rectangles, but that's okay. What you might notice as the boxes get bigger is that they're all facing just straight ahead. They're all facing the camera. Let me move the camera back a little so we can actually see the whole thing. All right, there it is. So, but let's say we don't want all these boxes to just face forward. Let's say we want them to face in a direction that mirrors the surface of the 3D model. So it kind of looks more like our base mesh when the particles are forming. So basically, you see how the chest is kind of facing this way. The way I express how it's facing, dragging that direction off of it, would be what the normals are doing. So if we take the normal information and go into our geometry node, which is somewhere, there it is. If we go into our geometry node and go to the second instance page, if we put the normal information, oh, do I not have normal information? Maybe it's because we have particles. That's probably why. This might do it too. Let's see what these are. No, it didn't like that. Why didn't it like that? All right, well, hang on. This is gonna bug me if I don't show you now. So, all right, so let's just take our 3D model here, and let's just add another null over here. We're just gonna switch it out for a second. So if I don't have particles, and if I have this as my default operator, well, then we lose that value, but that's fine. All right, so let's actually do this with let's do this with rectangles. It's just a little easier to see. The boxes add sort of an unnecessary dimension. So I'm gonna grab a rectangle. I'm gonna shrink that down by a lot. I grabbed the wrong one. Now we're taking forever. All right, let's see how that looks. Too small. Okay. Okay, well, this isn't a very detailed 3D model, so not a great example, but anyway, let's make them big enough to see. So if we go into the geo here and we, oh, for fuck's sake, compute normals if none exist. Okay, so why aren't you outputting my normals? Normals maintain length. Where am I losing normals? Okay, there we go. So now we got some normals. Hopefully they're the right ones. Anyway, if we put normals in these rotate to values, you'll start seeing the rectangles turn, and you'll start seeing the light hitting them differently, which is kind of the point of this whole exercise. So if I just go through and do 0, 1, and 2 for my X, Y, and Z, now you can see what I was talking about with the rectangles all moving to face in the direction of the 3D model. So everything is pointed in the direction. The face is pointing, the shoulders, so on and so forth. All of our particles are oriented the same way as the individual vertices that they're created from. Cool? Cool. Okay. Um, so I wonder if I add. All right. So now we're back to where we were, but I see nothing. What if I bring my boxes back? I still see nothing. Bizarre. That's pretty cool, though. All right. Well, anyway, we're doing abstraction, so I'm abandoning this line of thought. But you saw when I switched it to just straight off of the 3D model, you could see how adding that rotate to normal value in here just reoriented all of the particles so they matched the surface directions of our model. Okay, that was a mouthful. So here we have our undulating thing. Let's get back to what we were doing. So let me add those forces back in. I think it was 1 and 0.7. We have a lot more particles now, so it's doing some different stuff. Question is, do I like it? Oh, let's remove unused points. Don't like it when they sort of stick and float out there. Occasionally it's cool, but I prefer it to be deliberate. Okay, so maybe if we just did 1,000. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like the wave patterns it creates when it's more sparse like this. I bet this would look better with spheres, though. Okay, how big are our boxes? 0.037. Let's see if we can make that work. 4.03. Seven. All right, let's see how that looks. So if we just swap that out. No, I think I like the boxes better. Interesting. That's a rarity. All right. Proceeding on. Okay, so let's get back to what else we can do with forces. Okay, so we created this meta ball. We have this force thing. We have all this cool stuff. So what we need to do before we start messing with the forces is we need to make sure that our meta ball is large enough that the forces being enacted within its boundaries the meta ball needs to be bigger than this, or it needs to be sized and positioned appropriately to actually have an effect. If it's too small, or if it's placed outside of our particle system here, it's not going to have any impact on the behavior. It has to be, it has to intersect with it, and it has to be big enough to have an impact. So right now, I think the radius it defaults to 1. So that would put most of our model within its boundaries, just because we this one happens to be, like I said, a reasonable size, and we moved it so it's more or less centered on the origin. So typically I have to make this bigger. I don't think it's going to hurt anything if I do. I'll just make it a little larger so we can, hopefully encompass the head and most of the legs. And then, okay, cool. So I'll give you an example of what moving this around does in a second. But all right, so let's apply some forces. So we have our directional force on. Let's look at what's going on here. So we have some X, Y, and Z coordinates. Right now, default value is 1 in the Z direction with whatever happens. So that's fine. Let's just play with some things. I'm not 100% sure what axial force does. Vortex and spiral both create spirals, just in kind of different directions. So if we turn the vortex force on, we get this spiraling motion kind of at the center of this thing. Maybe I do need to make the radius bigger. So just to see what happens here, by the way, if you have a meta ball that's not big enough to impact the whole thing, it's only impacting part of it. If you move it around, notice how the spiral is going up and down based on what my Y value is here for the meta ball. So if we wanted to have, if we kind of wanted to make this thing dance just up and down between, I don't know, what's 1 point, what's the top there? Let's 1.4 and get down to the hips. There we go. 1.4 and -6, so we could animate that. Just grab a cosine pattern chop. And then reverse it because I want it to start low. Or actually, let's reverse it. Let's just change the phase. Is it 1 that'll do it? No. 0.25. No, that's a sine wave. 0.5. Yay! Okay, so there we go. All right, so now we have a wave that goes. That's great. That's what we want. How long? Let's change our project length here to 30 seconds. I guess I have to change end before I change our end. Huh? Okay, and then let's change the length of our wave to 1800. And then let's amplitude 1 is fine, but let's offset it by 1 so it actually let's make the amplitude 0.5 and then let's offset it by 0.5 and then we should have 0 to 1. Okay, so now we have a nice normalized wave, but those aren't the values we wanted, so let's put a math and change the range. 0 to 1 is going to be -0.6 to 1.4, if I recall correctly. All right, now let's grab a null just in case, and then let's take this and bring it over. Hey, meta ball. And then just add it to the Y center. So that translates the center of our meta ball up and down. What happens if I increase the radius a bit? There we go. All right, so now we have our meta ball moving up and down, and we have a vortex force of 1 applied in the Z direction. Let's see what happens if we zero that out, but change it to the Y direction. So we should have spinning along the vertical axis now. Similarly, let's see what happens in the X direction. so yeah, presumably it's kind of hard to see, but we should have some spinning along the x-axis now. So I thought the z direction was the most compelling. Let's see what happens if we crank that value a little bit. It should just be more extreme behavior. I'm not sure I actually see much of a difference. Okay, so let's, I do notice a major difference when you start to bump the vortex force up, though. Yeah, it just goes out of control. Which you might want. You might want to, have that as an animatable feature if you have, I don't know, something going on in music or something, and suddenly you want everything to explode. Boom, you could just crank up your vortex force by 10 or so. I think 1 is looking pretty good for this. Let's add some spiral force. Or actually, let's zero out vortex force and just do spiral force so you can see the difference. Let's see if we can see it a little better along Y. So I think what's happening is with the spiral force, it is still rotating about the axis, but it's also being pulled towards the axis. So it's essentially creating decaying orbits or a spiral, whereas the vortex just sort of spins around and doesn't get attracted into the axis. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. They may even get flung outward from the vortex and pulled inward with the spiral. So that's kind of interesting. Be sort of interesting to see what happens if you put an opposing spiral force with a vortex force. I guess an opposing spiral force is just more vortex, but whatever. Yeah. Anyway, you can start to get some wild stuff. Just kind of depending on what you want. We sort of have like a negative space outline. I wonder what this would look like if we added more particles. Like a lot. That's kind of fun. Yeah, fuck it, I'm keeping it. I feel like maybe we need more vortex force though. More vortex force? Okay, we got some stuff happening. Let's see. All right, cool. All right, so we have some particle stuff happening. So anyway, you've kind of seen what you can do with forces here. Let's turn on the axial force and see if we. So it's 2, -4. Let's just zero these out. See what axial force is. I guess that means it just travels in the direction of the axis. It's just going straight up right now, so yeah, okay. I guess we don't need any of that for the effect we're going for, if we're still actually going for an effect. What do I have? Why is it? Oh, I have wind in the particles. That's right. Okay, so let's put this back. That was 2, -4. What if I did this in the z direction? I just need to see. It's a little intense, but I think I like it. All right. Oh, let's just double check. What if we put y and z? if we do just Y. I think I like this one. All right, anyway, there's a bunch of stuff you can do with particles. The other thing, and I mentioned this in yesterday's, this is, I think, a little better with abstract shapes, but let's say you don't have a lot going on with this one. Let's say that you don't have all these forces on them. So here, let me just disconnect this real quick. And let me kill our wind. All right, so now we just have a thing making particles. So what we could do in this case to make things a bit more interesting is we could rotate the entire parent geometry. And what that does, since our particles don't create the whole thing at once, it kind of runs through it, you can get these bizarre shapes that get created because it's creating different pieces of this in different positions. So here, let me just show you. So if I rotate this, I think that's going to come straight at us. This should move side to side. Let's see. See what I mean? So as it rotates, and depending on the rate of rotation, you get different artifacts. So if we wanted to animate that as well, let me just make my little timeline tool, or Polyhop's little timeline tool. I'll probably throw credit to him in these until I feel like I've done it enough times where people just know. But what I'm making here is a nice tool for making looping behavior with your animations. It came from Simon Alexander Adams, probably better known as Polyhop on Instagram, maybe other social platforms too, not sure. But what we do is we take our, we get a timeline chop, and then we turn range end on, and then we attach it to a math, and then we divide those channels so we get a nice normalized position in the timeline just to this nice decimal number. So then we move that out to a lookup. And that's the first half of the lookup. Then we add these two patterns, and we might just change one of these to that. But now, let's do this. So what we need is a cosine. And usually I just copy and paste the sine wave. No, I need to make a new one. All right, so we will do that. We'll just copy, paste. Because I messed with this one. It's not our default values, and that will make it not work. So okay, anyway, cosine and sine, and then we need to merge these with a merge chop. Okay, cool. And then the result of all that is we get these two channels that effectively, because of the way that this one is decelerating as this one is accelerating, just based on where it is in this sine function or in this cosine function, what we get is a nice consistent circular motion of pretty much anything that we assign this to. So the method I learned this for was for looping noise. So if you take, total sidetrack here, but if you take a noise top and you choose one of the 4D options, and you go to transform, you can take this and you can apply this channel 1 to the Z transform, and then you can apply this channel 2 to the translate 4D parameter. And it's a pretty long loop. We got, well, here, I guess I can just show. this changes based on your timeline value. So if I change timeline value, notice this is moving way faster. I just decreased the number of frames in our timeline. So this got shortened, everything in here it's now moving a lot faster. But what you get is, see if I can make it a little more obvious. So you'll probably notice that after 10 seconds, this noise should repeat the exact same pattern. I know it's noise, so it's not like the easiest thing to see, but it's creating a nice smooth movement back and forth through the noise. And what the acceleration and deceleration of different parts allows us to do is to have that smooth motion where one value is slowing down, the other is ramping up, so we get this nice continual drive, rather than if you were to animate, say 3D noise, just with an LFO. If we turn that off, you'll see it. You'll see that it'll get slower and slower as it approaches the apex of the function, and it'll stop for a second and then reverse direction. So that's kind of the trouble with animating things with an LFO, is you always get that slowdown and that reversal. This is kind of an elegant way to avoid that. It always translates, or appears to be translating, in the same direction, and it never slows down and speeds up. It's always consistent behavior. So anyway, that was what I learned it for, but I use it for stuff like this all the time. So what were we going to use this for? Oh, right. So we're going to use it for making this thing spin in a circle at the speed of our timeline. So let's make that 30 seconds again. Okay, cool. And then if we take this out, right now it moves between -1 and 1, so let's change that. We need to be all right. So which one of these starts at 0? So channel 1 starts all the way at 1, that's fine. Or channel 2, okay, so we're gonna use channel 2 because it's gonna start all the way at one of our edges here. So 360 is the same as 0, so we won't start with this in the wrong position. So I'm gonna grab, not from that one, I'm gonna grab channel 2 from this, and I'm gonna take it up to our transform here, and then I'm gonna put that in the Z rotate. Let's see what happens. It's interesting that the point of rotation is still about its feet. I wonder if there's a way to change that pivot. Yeah, okay, so I think if we move the pivot up, it'll make him spin more around his middle. Maybe even 3. Okay, so anyway, it's not that dramatic, but you can sort of see it creating different patterns based on where this thing is. It's not exactly creating its specific shape. What if I'd I'd like to show you a more dramatic example. Nah, that's less dramatic. That might get weird because they'll be coming towards us. All right, well, still not like the most interesting thing in the world. I wonder if I just did an obnoxious amount of particles, I'm gonna lose some frames for sure here. Just pulse that just in case. Yeah, all right, it's not really doing it either. If I'll just show you. So, if you're using like what we did yesterday, if you're using a torus or a box or some shape, if you plug that in and rotate it, you get much more dramatic results because it's well, I guess it's maybe just a result of it being more abstract. And I moved the pivot on the transform, so it's kind of, again, not a great example. But anyway, animating your transform of your parent geometry when you're working with particles can produce some really interesting stuff. It's not right now, but oh well. I'm gonna paste this in Z too, just to see if it results in something. So, okay, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about with the hands now. Now that we have enough rotation, it's like you get this sort of sweepy looking hand. Yeah, it's kind of cool. All right, so I'm gonna apply our forces again and see if we do the whole thing together, what if our result is cool or not. I don't think our meta ball animation is doing much for it now, so let me pause that. So now our meta ball is just sitting still. I don't think I wanted a negative 0.6. I think I wanted like maybe 0.2, so a little above the origin. And then I think I probably want to make it bigger so it gets more. All right, so that's pretty neat. I'm gonna decrease the size of my boxes a little bit. Yeah, and you know what? It might look cool with spheres now. As you can see, the noodling never really ends. But a lot of the times the results are pretty cool. Sometimes making these obnoxiously large can be neat. It can also just not be that interesting. Let me try one other thing here. So there's a cool technique. I think we used it yesterday. But if you, in your geometry instancing, if you set the scale of your particles to be associated with how long they have been alive, then they kind of grow to this maximum size over the duration of their existence. So there's all of them set to life 0, and then they just grow to whatever size I have them set at over the course of their lifetime. And that can make using, pardon the pun, but big balls look a little more interesting because you get this sort of scaling effect. I don't know if I like this or not. Make them a little bigger even and see if that. That's kind of cool. Sort of looks like a bizarre cloud man. Let's just look at our boxes again. So if we have that scaling effect on the boxes, you can see it in action here. Let's make these a little bigger, I guess. Boxes get weird if they get too big. Yeah, it's good boy. I do kind of want to see, do we have normal stuff? Yeah, we do. Okay. So I do kind of want to reorient these. I'm not sure why. I think if I remember, it was making them all disappear if I do all 3. There's some kind of, oh no, okay, it's working. Maybe it's because it's rotating. Watch here though, I'll bet a little warning's gonna flash. Or not, maybe not. All right, so there's kind of the basis for what we're doing. Spheres or boxes, spheres or boxes, spheres or... Hey, you know what? I'll do both. I'll just leave them there. Okay, so we've got this. So what else do we want to do here? I think we want to give it a little post-render texture. Let's just use the pre-baked feedback image filter. I think that'll get us most of the way there. So I could be mistaken, but I think the feedback loop in the image filter, just the regular feedback, is the exact same thing as just making a regular feedback loop with nothing but a level top in it, and your composite set to add. I'm pretty sure, but time saver. Okay, so now we got some nice trails. I always like to, for the sake of colorization, add an RGBA delay in there. Sometimes it's a little much. What if we increase the opacity on this? Too much. Sometimes you got to mess with where this is in the order of things. If it's too late in the chain on some things, it'll create way too dramatic of effects. Same thing if it's too early. So I don't think this is kind of cool, but it's not what I was going for. So let's just abandon the image filter. Let's see what we can do here. So I want to try to get as close to the look of this as I can. So I can definitely tell there's some RGBA delay on there because you can see the red, green, and blue trails. I think this noisiness probably indicates displacement in a feedback loop using some noise to do the displacement. I'm just not sure how it's getting those nice. You know what? Maybe it's Bloom. Maybe Bloom is doing a lot of the legwork here. All right, so to really get this, we're going to need to make the boxes smaller. If that look is what we're really going for. So that's too small. That might be too big. What do we got in between? All right, I think I can work with that. Okay, so let's get our feedback loop going because there's definitely a feedback loop happening. So add our null, add our feedback. Add a composite. Make sure you drag the composite onto the feedback. Add a keyboard in chop so we can reset our feedback like so. Drag it onto the pulse button, select chop reference. And then we need to set this to add. Cool. And then let's get level top in there, and then let's get the opacity down a bit so it's not just painting. There we go. Now we get some trails. Shh. What? Okay. Let's turn it up a little bit more, I guess. All right. Okay, so what did I think it was? Displacement? Let's find out. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm dragging a noise off of the null. The reason I'm doing it that way is because I want our noise to be sized the same as everything else. So that's a way to not have to do it manually. All right, so let's drag that into the displace. That's cool, but that's not what I was after. So that means our displace is too high, so let's drag that down. 0 is too low, obviously, so let's start small. All right, and then I think maybe there was also a slope in there. Slope tends to create some of those grainy effects. See if upping the strength does anything. Okay, so it's starting to look kind of like it. So I think from here, now if we add an RGBA delay in after the feedback, it should be pretty cool. So one thing to note here, we did lose some frames. So when working with RGBA delay, when you actually render this, um, it's not going to be nearly as intense as what you're seeing here because you're going to have a much higher frame rate. So the actual amount that your red, green, and blue is getting dragged off, so to speak, is going to be a lot less. So it's going to be more of these kind of like orange and lighter blue shades, which I really like. It's kind of become a staple method of colorization for me, is using shades of gray and then putting this RGBA delay on them. Okay, so and we can tweak this too. It doesn't have to be. Bring it down a little bit. Yeah, all right. And we can pull our dry wet mix down a bit. All right, cool. So we've got a somewhat similar look, just different particle behavior. So let's polish this off because we're not quite there yet. So I think we need a bloom. All right, so let's tweak this to get it to where I'm talking about. All right, so first thing, let's pull the ramp glow level all the way down. That's what gives it this that's what colorizes it when you have bloom mostly. And then let's take the glow color and make it white. Then let's take threshold, take it all the way to 0. Okay, now you see we have kind of a glow on everything. Which might be what we want. It might be a little too much. So I'm going to shape it a bit so it's not quite so everywhere. I'm going to pull the number of iterations down to 3, and I'm going to pull the blur down a bit too. Let's pulse our feedback. Okay, so now we have nice glowing points. Let's just actually let's just do a check here. Let's do a sanity check. So if I kill the rotation and I disconnect the force, we have whatever the hell's going on here. If I delete that out, I think we're good. Yeah, okay. Then we have this, which is maybe cooler than what we had before. Okay, so what we had on the other one, is this still being animated? Let's see. All right, so what we had on the other one was just a different set of forces. So if I take spiral to 0, vortex to 0, I think if I just put axial, so yeah, it looks like if we have kind of a gentle axial force pulling down, there was a radial force as well. Anyway, not exact, but considering I'm not sure where the hell the source file is on the other one, it's not bad. We could tweak these forces quite a bit as well to get them, looking like we want them to. But I think I'm gonna set that to 2. Set that back to -4. Then I think I'm going to turn my rotations back on. And I think lastly, I'm going to pull the opacity down a little bit on my feedback. And I think I'm going to bump my bloom level, bump my glow level, and call it a day. So, okay. So there's an example of a lot of stuff that you can do with particle systems. Primary points to take away from this is you can download free geometry from CG Trader and a number of other sites. If you just Google free 3D models, just look for .obj files, and then you can pull them in here like that. And mess with the behavior. And then there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with the render phase with materials and so forth too, creating metallic reflective objects, or more realistic looking environments. So anyway, there you have it. I will catch you all next time.